You know the United Nations. One minute, you see them on the news authorizing a massive military force. The next, they seem to be watching helplessly as a crisis just spirals out of control. It's meant to be the planet's ultimate peacemaker, but let's be honest, it often feels like the world's most confusing bureaucracy. So how can it be both incredibly powerful and, at times, completely powerless?
Well, what if I told you that this huge contradiction, it isn't an accident? What if there's a secret flaw, or maybe it's actually a feature that was deliberately built into the UN's DNA from the very beginning? And that one thing explains everything. Stick with me because by the end of this, you will know exactly what it is.
So how are we going to crack this? The key to unlocking this whole mystery is right here, inside UC M. Hanamaki's excellent book, The United Nations, A Very Short Introduction. It's basically the blueprint for understanding this core paradox.
Okay, to really get a grip on the UN's problem, we have to start with its promise. And this wasn't just any promise. This was one forged in the fires of World War II, the deadliest conflict in all of human history.
I mean, just listen to the ambition in those words, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. This wasn't just some fancy diplomatic talk. For the people who survived that war, this was a sacred vow to make sure that kind of global catastrophe could never, ever happen again. The stakes couldn't have been higher.
So on one side, you have this incredibly noble, almost poetic promise. But then, on the other side, you have the cold, hard reality. As one U.S. ambassador famously put it, the UN was created to stop us from going to hell, not to take us to heaven. It was designed with very real limits from day one.
And yeah, this is where you can really see that gap between the promise and what actually happened. The scourge of war, it didn't just stop in 1945. Major conflicts kept breaking out, and in some of the most horrific cases, like the genocide in Rwanda, the UN seemed totally unable to stop the slaughter.
So what went wrong here? Was that incredible promise just empty words from the start, or is there something deeper going on? Well, the answer, that secret flaw we're looking for, it's been hiding in plain sight this whole time, right at the very heart of the UN's most powerful group, the Security Council.
And here it is, the answer to the whole puzzle. The veto power. This one single mechanism is both the UN's greatest weakness and, believe it or not, the very reason it's still around today. So what is it? Put simply, it's a kill switch. Any one of these 5 countries, the P5, who are the victors of World War II, can just say no and single-handedly stop any major UN action dead in its tracks. End of story.
But here's the twist, and it's a big one. This wasn't a bug in the system. It was the main feature. See, the UN's founders remembered why the old League of Nations failed so miserably, because major countries like the US either didn't join or just left when they felt like it. The veto was the price they paid to make sure the world's biggest players stayed in the game.
And this chart shows you exactly what happened next. For decades, especially during the Cold War, the veto basically became a political weapon. The Soviet Union used it over and over to block the West, and later, the US started using it to protect its own interests. The result? Total gridlock, a predictable and frequent paralysis. Okay, but that brings up a huge question, right? If the Security Council is the only part of the UN that can actually authorize military force, and it's constantly stuck in this veto power gridlock, how do we ever see the most famous symbol of the UN, the blue helmet peacekeepers? Where on earth do they come from?
Well, it turns out the UN's most famous and visible job wasn't part of the original plan at all. It was actually a brilliant and totally necessary improvisation.
That's right, the idea of peacekeeping is literally nowhere in the UN Charter. It was basically invented on the fly back in 1956 during the Suez Crisis. It was a genius workaround, a way to put troops on the ground to separate warring sides without actually taking a side, which meant they could get around the threat of a veto.
And look how big this improvisation became. By 2007, that clever little workaround had grown into a force of over 80,000 peacekeepers stationed all over the world. It just goes to show you how absolutely essential this idea, this workaround, has become. And it's not just about the peacekeepers. While the Security Council gets all the media attention for its high-stakes political drama, there's this huge UN family of agencies, and they're the ones on the ground every single day doing the tough, unglamorous, but absolutely vital work of helping people. This is the UN in action.
So all of this, the peacekeepers, the aid agencies, this massive globe-spanning operation, it costs an incredible amount of money. Which brings us to our final and maybe most important question.
Who's actually footing the bill? And you know what they say? Does the money follow the power? All right, this is where it all comes together. Let's connect the dots. By following the money trail, we can finally see who really holds the power at the United Nations.
And here you have it. A really small group of wealthy countries pays for most of the UN's core budget. Just look at that. The United States alone covers more than a fifth of the whole thing. Do you notice a few familiar names on that list?
And there's our payoff. The countries paying the most are, for the most part, the exact same countries that hold the veto. So that original flaw we talked about at the beginning, it was never a flaw. It's the central design. The UN was built to work with the world's most powerful countries, not to work against them. So in the end, that's what the United Nations is. It's this fundamental, messy, but probably necessary compromise. It's a constant tug of war between the incredible dream of global unity and the hard reality that nations will always look out for themselves.
And maybe this quote is the best way to think about it. The former Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld said, "We need to stop seeing the UN as this weird, abstract thing and instead see it as something we, humanity, drew ourselves. It's a reflection of us, with all our highest hopes and all our biggest flaws."
So now I have to ask you, knowing how it's designed, what do you think is the single biggest challenge the UN faces right now in the 21st century? I'd genuinely love to hear what you think down in the comments.
And hey, if you found uncovering this hidden logic of the UN fascinating, you are definitely not going to want to miss our next explainer. We're going to dive deep into another huge global institution to reveal the secret rules that really make it tick. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that.